Well, first this evening, the U.S. presidential race, the 2024 election, is heating up as candidates ramp up their campaigns ahead of the November vote. The race has become increasingly intense, with Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump dominating the headlines. Both candidates have been crisscrossing the country, rallying their bases and addressing key issues that could sway undecided voters. With the first ballot set to be cast in just a few weeks, polls indicate a tightening race, particularly in swing states. The upcoming debates are expected to play a crucial role in shaping the campaign's final weeks as voters weigh their options in what is shaping up to be one of the most closely watched elections in recent history. Well, for more on this, I am joined online by international political strategist and former Republican candidate for the U.S. Congress, George Ajjan. Hello, George. How are you doing? Thank you for joining us today.
Nice to be with you. Thank you.
Great. Now, the news story mentions a tightening race, especially in the swing states. Which swing states will be most crucial in determining the outcome of the 2024 election?
We tend to group them in two broad categories. One, which they call the Rust Belt. Those are the states like Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania. It's named Rust Belt because those are historically the industrial base, Michigan as well. Steel industry, automotive industry, et cetera. And of course, those states have been hard hit by the economy, lack of jobs, the outpouring of industry. And then we have what's called the Sun Belt, which are states in the southern part of the country, whether east or west, Georgia, Arizona. And those also have been very tight if we look at the polling for this year's race. So we have the Rust Belt and in the sort of Midwest, and then we have the Sun Belt in the southern part of the country.
Well, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump they've been dominating the headlines. Now, how do you think their different campaign strategies are resonating with the voters?
I think each of them has a challenge, which is to say that they've almost tapped out their potential to win over voters. Kamala Harris potentially has a bit more room left to squeeze out some undecided voters, but Trump is a very well-known quantity, and it's unlikely that he's going to, in the last 2 months, appeal to people who might suddenly find that he's a palatable candidate. Harris is positioning herself as the newcomer, even though she's an incumbent vice president. So we're really in a strange and uncharted situation here. She also, though, when you look at the numbers, there's not a whole lot of room for her to grow. People are pretty well set in terms of how they're going to vote, which means that it's incumbent upon each of the campaigns to turn out the people who are passionate about them. And that's why you tend to see the campaigns really focusing on the base. That also helps them to raise money, to run ads to turn out more voters. But we're not seeing a whole lot of effort to try to win over middle ground. This is really about trying to turn out the base.
All right, let's move our attention to some of the issues being addressed during this campaign. We have critical issues that has to do with fracking. There's one other issue, but is it enough to sway undecided voters? In your opinion, what are the top issues that could make or break this election?
We could go back to the famous campaign of Bill Clinton in 1992, where the slogan was, "It's the economy, stupid." In other words, all these other things are really secondary to people's economic situation and how they're feeling, how they're living day to day, week to week. And that is not to the advantage of Kamala Harris because she's an incumbent vice president. Inflation has gone off the rails in the past few years. Prices have swelled enormously, and everybody's feeling that. Even people who are economically comfortable are shocked at the rise of prices. I spent a lot of time outside the country. I'm here right now visiting for the summer. I am shocked going to the supermarket or even to fast food restaurants and seeing how prices have gone up. And so that's going to be, I think, ultimately the main thing that decides this election. So Harris is going to have to pull a rabbit out of a hat in terms of, in only a few months, convince people that she has solutions to the economy. And that's not very easy to do. At the same time, Donald Trump can play upon the fact that he's not an incumbent, and he can sell people the idea that when I was there, the economy was better, the prices were not as high, inflation was not running as rampant. And that's resonating. But a lot of that will come down to the very end and how people feel about their economic fortunes in the next 4 years at the last moment. As they say, undecideds tend to break for the challenger, although in this case, again, we're in uncharted territory because we have an incumbent vice president and we have a former president. That's never, ever happened before. And so it's really anyone's guess as to how that will play out.
That's quite interesting. Now, with the first ballots about to be cast, how significant do you think early voting will be in this election compared to previous ones?
Well, when we go back to the way it was years ago, this would seem extraordinarily bizarre that people are voting 2 months before the election. But those tend to be people that know who they're going to vote for anyway. And so it's probably not having that huge of an impact. And both parties are eligible to do that. I think really the race is still going to depend on those people who make up their mind in the last few weeks. Don't forget, we have a debate coming up in about a week's time, and that will be the first chance for people to really evaluate Kamala Harris under the gun, and also in the context of Donald Trump.
Talking about the debates that you mentioned, very, very crucial. What are the specific topics that you feel, or performances, should we be watching out for in this debate?
I think there's a key thing to watch for each person. In the case of Kamala Harris, she's been branded by the Trump campaign as lightweight, someone who doesn't have any policy, someone who floats with the wind, changes her position with the wind. She's going to have to come across very strong, very determined, very concise on what she wants to do, especially in terms of tackling inflation and fixing the economy. That's crucial for her. If she manages to do that, she can get a bump out of it. In Trump's case, it's the same thing that's been for him since he entered the political realm. He needs to keep himself under control and be disciplined in the way that he answers and stick to the topics. Going into personal attacks is great for the people who love him and the people who will donate money to him. But that's not going to convince over undecided voters who are potentially sick and tired of the very negative tone of this whole campaign. I mean, both campaigns are horrible at this. Trump and the Republican campaign is just about name-calling towards the Democrats, whereas the Democrats seem addicted to their own outrage for the past 10 years over Donald Trump, like a bunch of drug addicts. And so that's not been helpful to them as well. People want to see some substantive policy to see how who they vote for will make their lives better. Neither campaign has been very good at that at all in this election cycle.
You're very correct. The name calling is quite interesting, the back and forth. Well, let me, before I let you go, given the intensity of the race, how do you see the role of social media and digital campaigning evolving in this election cycle?
There's two sides to it. You can't deny how enormous the role of social media is. On the one hand, that creates an echo chamber for people who strictly stick to the people who are in their friend circle, the people they follow on X, who they're friends with on Facebook, and that tends to be an echo chamber of people of like mind. So at the same time, there are ads being used. So if it's used smartly, and by the way, the Trump campaign is back as 2016 used social media very, very intelligently. So you cannot deny the impact of social media. At the same time, what the vitriol that you see is really just reinforcing people who have already decided how they're going to vote. So you really have to parse that to see how are they, and that's not immediately evident just by logging onto Facebook and seeing what you see. It's exactly the swing states that you mentioned. How are they micro-targeting people and figuring out exactly what messages to deliver to people in specific counties or even specific municipalities to figure out what might motivate them to come out and vote, or in fact to stay home and not vote for the person that they might potentially favor. That's part of the campaign as well.
All right, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Georgina.
All right.